The villains, those poor unfortunate souls. How the mighty have tumbled, huh? Sorry, not sorry, but my sympathy's all used up. When you've dedicated centuries to crafting magnificent crystal spires and writing philosophical essays, all while completely neglecting the basics, like, I don't know, defense systems, you're practically asking for the universe to give you a swift kick in the gut. Commander Lila Monroe stood at the viewing platform, arms crossed in frustration, as she surveyed the massive crack spreading across Vexel Prime's atmosphere. The jagged fracture glowed an angry red, a glaring contrast to the otherwise peaceful purple sky, a constant glaring reminder of their inevitable doom. "How long?" she asked, her voice flat and devoid of emotion, refusing to look at Science Officer Maxwell Rivers, who nervously fiddled with his datapad. "About 87 rotations, Commander," Maxwell stammered, his voice wavering. "Maybe 90, if the atmospheric stabilizers manage to hold up, but that's optimistic." He cleared his throat. "Actually, that's a generous guess. 75 rotations is more accurate." Lila sighed dramatically. "Our ancestors spent 10,000 years crafting a perfect society, mandatory meditation sessions, mood-sensitive architecture. But not one of them thought, hey, maybe we should prepare for asteroid storms. Genius. The Xantari had evolved on a sheltered planet, the third from their sun, with stable weather patterns and abundant resources. Their species had developed 4 arms, iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions, currently a troubled shade of gray-blue for most, and highly advanced cerebral functions. They'd eradicated social problems centuries ago. No poverty, no disease, no conflict. For the last 300 years, their most pressing societal debate had revolved around whether poetry should be written in 7-line or 9-line verses. And now they were staring down extinction, all because no one had bothered to look up at the sky. The cosmic barrage, as it was now being called in every newsfeed, because even apocalypses need catchy titles, had begun 3 months ago. A previously undetected asteroid field had drifted into their solar system, and the first giant rock collided with their artificial moon, destroying it. The debris that followed wreaked havoc on their atmosphere, and every subsequent asteroid impact worsened the situation. "Commander, the Council is requesting your presence," said Communications Officer Olivia Sinclair, her skin a bright, anxious yellow. "They're actually demanding it with exclamation points." "Oh, exclamation points. How terrifying," Lila muttered, rolling all 4 of her eyes in synchronized irritation, a skill she'd honed after endless council meetings. Did they send it on Senate stationery too? The Shatar High Council, consisting of the oldest and supposedly wisest members of their species, had spent the first month of the crisis debating the ethics of altering the natural course of space objects. By the time they finally approved defensive measures, their orbital platforms were too damaged to be of any use. Lila stormed through the crystal corridors of the command center, passing Xantari in various stages of panic and denial. Some clutched personal shields, completely useless against the impending atmospheric collapse, but the comfort they offered seemed to be enough. Others sat in meditation circles, humming soothing tunes meant to bring harmony to the universe's chaos. Right, because cosmic harmony had worked out so well for them so far. "Commander!" Chief Engineer Jasmine Carter intercepted her, looking disheveled and frazzled. "I've run every simulation we have. Our evacuation ships can only hold 28% of the population. And we barely have enough supplies for a quarter rotation of space travel." "Fantastic," Lila responded, her voice thick with sarcasm. "So we save a quarter of our people, and the rest of them starve to death while drifting aimlessly through space. Wonderful plan." Jasmine's skin flushed a deep purple of embarrassment. The Shatar ships were designed for scientific exploration and diplomacy, not mass evacuations or survival. Lila threw her hands up in frustration. Yes, I know. Our entire civilization is built on impractical beauty and endless philosophical musings." As she neared the council chambers, Lila took a moment to collect herself. Despite her frustration, she was still a commander responsible for billions of lives. If there was any chance of saving her people, she needed to convince the council to act, quickly and decisively. "We have one option left," she muttered to herself, "and they're going to hate it." But when you're desperate, you start making strange choices, and the Xantari had never been more desperate. The Shatar High Council chamber, with its enormous soaring ceilings and acoustics designed to make every statement sound profound, suddenly felt stifling. The 12 ancient Xantari, dressed in flowing robes that changed color with their emotional states naturally, stared down at Lila from their elevated semicircular platform. "Let me summarize," Lila began, cutting straight to the point, her tone as sharp as a blade. Our atmosphere is failing. Our evacuation ships are inadequate. Our defense systems don't exist. And we've got about 75 rotations until extinction. Am I missing anything? High Counselor Daniel Frost, his skin a troubled gray, cleared his throat. You've neglected the proper greeting protocols, Commander Vidian. Oh, for the love of... Lila caught herself just in time. With all due respect, Counselor, maybe we can skip the formalities while our world is literally falling apart. Protocol maintains civilization in times of crisis, intoned Counselor Avery Brooks, her voice wavering despite her attempt to sound authoritative. Lila considered banging her head against the crystal podium. Maybe that would count as a resignation. What maintains civilization is survival, counselors, she said, her voice hard as she activated her datapad, projecting a hologram of their solar system. We've exhausted all internal solutions. Our technology can't repair the atmosphere fast enough. Our ships can't evacuate enough people or travel far enough. We need external assistance. The council chamber erupted in shock. Commander, Counselor Zane Sullivan, his skin now an affronted pink, asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. You want to contact other species? He sounded as though she'd suggested they start eating their young. Yes, Lila responded without hesitation. We need to send a distress signal, an SOS. We know other civilizations are out there. We've detected artificial structures on multiple worlds, but we've never made contact, protested Counselor Liam Hudson. The great philosophy teaches us that we must attain perfect enlightenment before engaging with other sentient beings. Lila couldn't help herself. She burst out laughing, the sound echoing sharply through the chamber, a jarring contrast to the usual measured tones. And how enlightened will we be when we're all dead? Besides, which is more enlightened, preserving our cultural purity or saving billions of lives? Thankfully, Science Officer Maxwell Rivers stepped forward to intervene before Lila could cause any more offense. Counselors, we've identified several potential civilizations within signal range. The closest appears to be a planet called Earth. Their technology seems primitive but functional. Primitive? Counselor Daniel Frost's skin wrinkled in disgust. They use combustion engines and physical projectiles, Maxwell explained apologetically. Yes, but they've reached their moon, established orbital stations, and their communication technology is surprisingly sophisticated. Chief Engineer Jasmine Carter joined them, her skin shifting nervously between green and blue. I've modified our quantum beacon array. We can send a concentrated signal to their system, detailing our situation and providing coordinates. If they're advanced enough to interpret it, and benevolent enough to respond, we could have a chance. The words lingered in the air. Asking strangers for help went against everything the Xantari believed in: self-sufficiency, isolation, the sanctity of their culture. And then, Counselor Avery Brooks asked, what if these Earthlings are hostile? Lila gestured toward the viewing window, where the ominous red cracks spiderwebbed across the sky. What choice do we have? Die with certainty or risk survival? After 6 hours of debate, which Lila considered remarkably brief by council standards, they reached their decision. The vote was 8-4 in favor of sending the signal. This is either the salvation or the final mistake of our civilization, Counselor Daniel Frost intoned gravely, authorizing the transmission. Lila watched as Jasmine Carter activated the quantum beacon, sending their desperate plea across the stars. Well, Lila muttered to Maxwell, now we get to see if anyone's listening. The signal shot out from Vexel Prime, carrying with it the fate of an entire species. 74 rotations remained. In the bustling chaos of NASA's Deep Space Communication Complex outside Canberra, Australia, Dr. Grace Morgan was having a spectacularly awful day. First, the coffee machine had broken down. Then her carefully arranged stack of research papers had been knocked over by an overly enthusiastic intern. Now, the anomaly detection system was going haywire, blaring alerts that made absolutely no sense. Someone please shut that thing off before I use it for target practice, she groaned, rubbing her temples. Jonah Campbell, what's triggering it this time? Jonah Campbell, the signal processing specialist who had a penchant for Hawaiian shirts even in Australian winter, stared at his monitor with his mouth hanging open. Grace, it's a pattern, a complex repeating pattern with embedded data. His fingers flew across the keyboard. This isn't random. This isn't natural. This is... Holy smokes, spit it out, Grace snapped. leaning over his shoulder as data streamed across the screen. Unbelievably complex mathematical sequences resolved themselves into what appeared to be coordinates, technical specifications, and most incredibly, images. Images of beings with 4 arms, strange architecture, and a planet with a massive fracture in its atmosphere. "What the actual?" Grace whispered. "It's an SOS, Jonah said, his voice trembling with excitement. "A literal alien SOS. They're dying, Grace. Their world is dying." Within hours, the signal was verified by 3 other listening stations. Within a day, the UN Security Council convened an emergency session. Within 3 days, the most bizarre and unprecedented global cooperation in human history was underway. "They want our help?" General Helena Vasquez of the United Nations Space Command laughed during the briefing. "They're sending distress signals to humans? To humans, the species that can't even agree on pizza toppings or which way toilet paper should hang? The civilization that invented both penicillin and reality TV." Dr. Blake Thompson, astrophysicist and newly appointed head of the Holy Crap Aliens Are Real response team, not its official name, but the one everyone was using, added with a grin. "Apparently, we're the closest technologically capable species." "Do they know who they're asking?" someone in the back asked. Dr. Blake Thompson grinned. "No, and that might be their biggest mistake, or their greatest stroke of luck. Because if there's one thing humans love more than fighting each other, it's showing off what we can do when we actually work together." And just like that, Operation Stellar Samaritan was born. The next 3 weeks saw something unprecedented in human history. People actually cooperating without spending half the time arguing about who deserved credit. Well, mostly. "You're telling me we're going to retrofit 7 spacecraft, develop atmospheric repair technology we don't even have, and travel to another solar system in less than 2 months?" President Eleanor Chen slammed her hand on the conference table. "That's impossible." "Normally, yes," Dr. Blake Thompson replied, adjusting his glasses. "But this is humanity faced with the ultimate challenge, proving we're not the cosmic losers everyone assumes we are." The Emergency Global Coalition, now affectionately dubbed Team Earth by social media, commandeered every major space facility on the planet. SpaceX, NASA, ISA, CNSA, and Roscosmos engineers worked side by side, their decades-old rivalries forgotten in the rush of adrenaline and impossibility. The Shaitar transmission included detailed specifications of their atmospheric composition and the damage, explained Dr. Layla Patel, an atmospheric scientist and now head of the Fix Their Air division. "We've actually been developing similar technology to repair our own ozone layer. The principles are surprisingly compatible. We just need to scale up by about 8,000%. No biggie." Her laugh had a slightly manic edge. Around the world, factories were retooled overnight. Defense budgets were rerouted. Billionaires' pet projects were commandeered. The politicians, once at each other's throats, were now suddenly best friends, united by a common purpose, showing off human ingenuity to the entire galaxy. "The best part," Jonah Campbell said with a rare chuckle during a break, demolishing his 5th energy drink, "is that these aliens picked us because we were the closest civilization with functional technology. Can you imagine? They probably think we're their last hope, the interstellar equivalent of asking that one weird neighbor you never talked to for a cup of sugar." Back in Houston, General Helena Vasquez oversaw the crew selection. "We need the best pilots, engineers, scientists, and I suppose a diplomat," she said. "A diplomat?" Colonel Robbie Singh raised an eyebrow. "You mean someone who can communicate with 4-armed aliens without triggering an interspecies incident? Preferably someone who doesn't find mood-changing skin colors funny." The crew selection became an obsession around the globe. Children skipped school to watch the announcements. Office workers streamed training sessions. Merchandise flooded the market overnight. Action figures of astronauts who hadn't even launched yet, T-shirts emblazoned with slogans like "Earth-saving alien butts since 2025" and "Humans, not just good for reality TV anymore." The spacecraft themselves were marvels of rushed engineering. The ISS was partially dismantled for its parts. Experimental fusion engines were installed without the usual years of testing. Engineers practically duct-taped solutions together while muttering, "This would never pass inspection in normal circumstances." But these weren't normal circumstances. These were the moments when humanity finally had a shot at proving itself to the universe. 42 days after receiving the SOS, the fleet was ready. 7 ships, each with names like Goodlore, Cosmic Cavalry, and Hold My Beer, were prepared for launch. Each carried atmospheric repair technology, medical supplies tailored to Shatar physiology based on the data they received, and crews made up of the best and most daring volunteers Earth had to offer. "We've got 29 days to reach them," Captain Aiden Hayes, commander of the lead ship, said. "Before their atmosphere completely fails. Anyone want to back out?" Silence. "Then let's go make first contact and try not to embarrass ourselves too much." The launches were live-streamed to 11 billion people, all holding their collective breath. Humanity's response to an alien SOS was underway, and the universe was about to learn a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the species that turned "hold my beer and watch this" into an entire cultural ethos. 28 rotations after sending the distress signal, the Xantari detected 7 unknown objects entering their solar system. The observation team nearly crashed their monitoring systems in their rush to inform Commander Lila Monroe. "Impossible," Lila muttered, her eyes fixed on the readings. "They couldn't have responded this quickly. No civilization has that kind of technology." "They're coming in at speeds we've never recorded," Maxwell Rivers confirmed, his skin shifting to an astonished shade of turquoise. "And they're communicating in our language patterns." The Shatar Council Chamber, usually a place of measured discourse and philosophical musings, erupted into chaotic chatter as the news spread. The aliens had actually responded, and they were coming not with 1 ship, but 7. "They must be an ancient, highly advanced civilization," Counselor Daniel Frost theorized, his skin glowing with reverence. "Perhaps they possess the enlightenment we've been searching for millennia." Lila had ordered their remaining functional satellites to capture images of the incoming vessels. What they revealed caused her to burst into unexpected laughter. "Ancient and highly advanced? Not exactly," she said, still laughing. The human ships looked like they'd been thrown together by overzealous children with access to a scrapyard, mismatched panels, exposed structural elements, and bizarrely, actual cloth coverings on some sections. One ship even had writing on its side, which their translation systems rendered as space roadside assistance. "They're hailing us," announced Communications Officer Olivia Sinclair, her voice full of disbelief. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a human face. The being had only 2 arms visible, skin that didn't change colors, and a facial expression that was somehow both familiar and foreign at the same time. "Greetings, people of Vexel Prime," the human said, flashing an unnervingly wide smile. "I'm Captain Aiden Hayes of Earth's Interstellar Response Fleet. We got your SOS. The cavalry has arrived." Lila stepped forward, performing the abbreviated greeting gesture. "I'm Commander Lila Monroe of the Shatar Command. You actually came?" "Of course we came," Aiden Hayes replied, as though it were the most obvious thing in the universe. "You were in trouble. We had ships. Well, we didn't exactly have ships ready, but we made them. Fast. Really fast. Like, probably too fast for safety protocols, but hey, here we are." The human's casual, rapid-fire speech left the Shatar struggling to keep up. The council members behind Lila were shifting through various shades of confusion and disbelief. "Your journey should have taken years," Maxwell Rivers interjected, unable to hold back his curiosity. "Yeah, about that." Aiden Hayes grinned even wider, running a hand through her short black hair. "We kind of invented a new propulsion system, or maybe cobbled together is more accurate. Our engineers have been working in 3-hour shifts for weeks, powered by coffee and the absolute terror of testing experimental engines in space. But the good news is, they worked, mostly." Lila noticed something in the background of the human vessel, what appeared to be duct tape holding together a control panel. "Is that tape?" she asked, unable to stop herself. "Duct tape," confirmed another human who popped into view with alarming lack of protocol. "Holds the universe together, literally in this case. I'm Dr. Grace Morgan, by the way. We brought atmosphere stabilization tech. Should fix your skycracking problem." The Shatar Council was left speechless. These were their saviors? Who in their right mind would use adhesives as structural components and talk about emergency response like they were just planning a casual outing? Leela found herself caught in a strange mix of horror and reluctant hope. "Our atmospheric degradation has accelerated," she reported, her eyes scanning the latest data. "We have roughly 47 rotations left before total atmospheric collapse." "Perfect," Captain Aiden Hayes exclaimed, as though this were good news. "We've brought enough supplies for 50 Earth days. Cutting it close, that's how we like it. Permission to enter orbit and deploy landing teams?" Behind Lila, Counselor Daniel Frost turned a shade of purple that had never been seen in Shatar society, a confused mix of shock and offense. He weakly nodded, but as the communication ended, Lila turned to her team. "Prepare for their arrival," she said, trying to hide her unease. "And maybe relocate any particularly fragile cultural artifacts from the landing area. Something tells me our guests might get a bit enthusiastic." Within hours, human shuttles began descending through the fractured atmosphere, bringing Earth's unique, chaotic form of assistance. The Grand Crystal Plaza of Vexel Prime had been carefully prepared for the formal ceremony. Fragile sculptures had been moved, as Lila had suggested, and meditation fountains temporarily deactivated. The council had spent 6 hours selecting the perfect ceremonial robes, ultimately choosing a serene blue meant to convey peace and gratitude. But what no one had prepared for was the sheer volume of humans. "Wow, this architecture is incredible," Dr. Jackson Barnes, Earth's cultural liaison, exclaimed, his voice bouncing off the acoustically perfect walls. "These crystalline structures must have taken centuries to grow." The Shaitar greeting party collectively cringed. Their sensitive hearing, adapted to detect the slightest harmonic changes, was now assaulted by what seemed like deliberate sonic warfare. "Please," Counselor Avery Brooks whispered, her skin turning an alarming shade of white. "Modulate your voice tones. Our hearing is quite—" "Oh, sorry," Dr. Jackson Barnes shouted louder, then quickly corrected himself. "Sorry," he repeated, his voice dropping to what humans would consider a whisper, though it still sounded as loud as a normal conversation. Cultural differences noted. Captain Aiden Hayes stepped forward, attempting the formal Shaitar greeting gesture, but it looked more like she was trying to swat invisible flies. "We're honored to be welcomed into your—" "Wow, is that ceiling actually reacting to emotional energy? That's amazing." The human delegation seemed utterly incapable of staying on track or following the carefully planned sequence of events. They asked questions in the middle of rituals, took photographs with devices that emitted blinding flashes, and kept touching things, cultural artifacts, with their bare hands. "Our engineers are ready to start atmospheric repair right away," Aiden Hayes continued. But behind her, a human in an orange jumpsuit was discreetly scanning a sacred meditation crystal with a beeping device. Watching Counselor Daniel Frost's skin shift through increasingly alarmed hues, Lila stepped in quickly. "Perhaps we should move to the technical briefing area," she suggested, trying to regain control of the situation. "The council has arranged 3 days of cultural exchange before we begin any work." Counselor Daniel Frost insisted, though his voice wavered. "3 days?" Chief Engineer Maya Gibson interrupted, glancing up from her tablet. "Your atmosphere will lose another 4.2% of its integrity in that time. We really should have started yesterday." The Shaitar Council gasped at the interruption. In the history of their 10,000-year civilization, no one had ever dared to interrupt a council member mid-sentence. "Cultural protocols require proper ceremonial," Counselor Daniel Frost began, but Maya Gibson plowed ahead, unaware of the grave social violation she was committing. "With all due respect," she continued, "your cultural protocols won't mean much if we're all suffocating. The atmospheric stabilizers need to be placed at specific coordinates in your upper atmosphere, and we need to start manufacturing replacement components for your damaged systems." The humans had already begun unpacking equipment, large, clunky machines with exposed gears and handwritten labels. Some of the components were held together with the mysterious duct tape, and others made unsettlingly discordant noises when activated. Science Officer Maxwell Rivers, breaking all protocol, had abandoned his post in the greeting line and was now examining the human technology with unhidden fascination. "These systems are so primitive, yet surprisingly innovative," he commented. "You're using physical switches instead of thought interfaces?" "Yep," a human technician responded with a grin. "Much less likely to fail when you're in a rush. Can't accidentally shut off life support because you were thinking about lunch." Meanwhile, Dr. Grace Morgan had approached the massive viewing window, gazing at the cracked atmosphere. "We're thinking some combination of molecular bonding at the quantum level, plus good old-fashioned force field generation, should fix this up," she said casually. "Force fields?" Lila repeated slowly, her skepticism evident. "We concluded those were impossible 3 centuries ago." Grace Morgan snorted. "Yeah, well, we didn't read that paper." The ceremonial welcome spiraled further off course when a human pulled out a container and began consuming something with a truly overpowering aroma. "Anyone hungry?" Lieutenant Carlos Mendes asked, offering the container around. "It's beef jerky, protein for energy." Counselor Vega Pulsar, a devout advocate for plant-based consciousness, promptly fainted. By the end of the first hour, the Xantari were in a state of full-blown cultural shock. The welcome ceremony had completely fallen apart, and the humans were already hauling equipment toward the atmospheric control center, leaving muddy boot prints on ceremonial floors and chattering eagerly about quick fixes and jury-rigged solutions. Lila watched in a mix of horror and reluctant admiration. They're either going to save us or give the entire council a collective nervous breakdown. Probably both, Maxwell Rivers muttered, his skin flashing between a conflicted purple and orange. Definitely both. By the 14th day after the humans' arrival, Commander Lila Monroe had developed a persistent eye twitch. The council had completely abandoned any attempt to maintain formalities, and several members had reportedly gone into deep meditation retreats, trying to process the cultural shock. "You want to do what to our atmospheric generators?" Lila asked, staring incredulously at the diagram engineer Maya Gibson had drawn on the back of a food wrapper. "Overclock them," Maya replied, as though this was perfectly normal. "Basically, we push your systems way past their safety limits, dump in our experimental stabilizing compounds, and trigger a chain reaction that should seal the atmospheric breach." Lila's skin shifted to a skeptical yellow. "Listen, this is how humans solve problems," Captain Aiden Hayes explained, leaning casually against a sacred pillar. "We've got limited time, insufficient resources, and a problem too big to ignore. Big for conventional solutions, that's when we get creative," Captain Aiden Hayes said with a grin, clearly unbothered. "Creative?" Lila repeated softly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You realize that if this fails, we could accelerate our atmospheric collapse?" "Risk versus reward," Dr. Grace Morgan nodded casually, her expression serious yet confident. "But we brought backup plans. Plans B through what are we on now? Maya Gibson, I think we're up to Plan M, though Jacobson's work with the quantum resonators might technically be Plan N." The humans had transformed the pristine atmospheric control center into something resembling a chaotic disaster zone. Equipment was strewn everywhere, with makeshift workstations assembled from sacred relics and storage containers. Teams rotated in shifts around the clock, consuming an alarming amount of coffee and energy drinks that left them exhausted but driven. Still, progress was undeniably being made. The atmospheric degradation rate had slowed from 0.85% daily to 0.3%. The repair shuttles, constantly darting through the upper atmosphere, had already sealed 2 of the 7 major fractures. "Your civilization achieved peace and harmony through careful planning and adherence to protocols," observed Dr. Jackson Barnes, chewing on something resembling a protein bar but smelling faintly of artificial berries. "Earth thrives on barely controlled chaos and tight deadlines." 3 days later, the situation reached a breaking point. The largest atmospheric crack began to expand exponentially, threatening to cause a cascade failure. "The conventional methods aren't working fast enough," Maya Gibson said over the emergency channel, her voice cutting through the tension. "Time for Plan Q." "Plan Q?" someone asked in disbelief. "Yes, Plan Q," Maya confirmed. "We do now." What followed was something that no Xantari would ever forget. The 7 Earth vessels positioned themselves in perfect alignment around the planet. The repair shuttles were recalled, and in direct defiance of every known safety protocol, the humans activated all of their experimental atmospheric stabilizers simultaneously, while overclocking the Shatar planetary systems to 300% capacity. The resulting energetic pulse was visible from the surface, a massive wave of blue-green light, rippling across the damaged atmosphere. For a horrifying moment, the cracks seemed to widen further. Then, like a miracle, or the outcome of reckless engineering that might just have paid off, the fractures began to seal. They knitted together as the experimental compounds catalyzed with the native atmosphere. "Holy crap, it worked!" Maya Gibson shouted over the comms, her voice booming with excitement. "Forget the volume sensitivity." The Xantari watched in stunned silence as their atmospheric integrity began to climb. 68%, 72%, 80%. "The self-repair cycle has started," confirmed Maxwell Rivers, his skin shifting to a jubilant turquoise. "The atmosphere is repairing itself." "That was your plan all along?" Lila asked, astonished. "To trigger a planetary-scale self-repair reaction by shocking the system?" Aiden Hayes grinned. "Honestly, we had about a 60% chance of it working, but when the stakes are high, you take the risk." "You risked everything on odds barely better than random chance," Lila said, still processing what had just happened. Welcome to the human approach to crisis management. Aiden Hayes winked. We call it winging it. 3 weeks after the atmospheric crisis had been resolved, Vexel Prime's skies had returned to their natural purple hue. The repair work was complete, the emergency was over, and the humans were preparing to leave. In the Great Hall of Wisdom, which had always been reserved for the most significant historical events, Commander Lila Monroe stood beside Captain Aiden Hayes. The full Xantari Council was present, but today, their ceremonial robes had been replaced by simple, practical clothing. It was a radical cultural shift, perhaps the most dramatic in 10,000 years of Xantari history. The Xantari people owe humanity a debt we can never repay, Counselor Daniel Frost said, his skin a sincere, deep blue of gratitude. You came when we called. You saved our world. You have taught us lessons we never expected to learn. Captain Aiden Hayes smiled. That's what neighbors do, even cosmic ones. Lila watched the humans mingling with the Xantari. Cultural differences were still apparent, but somehow less important now. Engineer Maya Gibson was deep in conversation with Maxwell Rivers, sketching plans for a new planetary defense system. Dr. Jackson Barnes was attempting to master Xantari color-shifting meditation with limited success, but endless enthusiasm. We had assumed, Lila admitted quietly to Aiden Hayes, that any civilization advanced enough to help us would be like us, orderly, structured, and driven by protocols. We never imagined salvation would come in the form of what did you call it? Organized chaos, Aiden Hayes laughed. That's humanity in a nutshell, she said. Your ships are held together with adhesives. Your plans change every hour. Your technology is a confusing mix of brilliance and improvisation. By all logic, your civilization shouldn't function at all, and yet here we are. Aiden Hayes grinned, gesturing to their surroundings. Maybe the universe doesn't care much about logical standards. The formal farewell ceremony, which would traditionally last 3 days, was condensed into a mere 4 hours, another unprecedented concession to practicality over tradition. As the ceremony ended, Counselor Avery Brooks approached the human delegation. We have prepared a gift, she said, presenting a crystal sphere in which colors swirled to mimic the newly repaired Xantari atmosphere, a symbol of what we accomplished together. We brought something for you too, Dr. Grace Morgan replied, pulling out a small package. Inside was a roll of the now famous gray adhesive tape, duct tape for emergencies. Instead of being offended, the council actually laughed, a sound so rare in the Great Hall of Wisdom that it echoed through the chamber. Later, as the human crews boarded their mismatched fleet of vessels, Lila stood with Maxwell Rivers at the viewing platform, reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. They're so different from us, Maxwell mused, his skin a thoughtful purple. We spent millennia perfecting our society, eliminating conflict, creating harmony, and they spend their time embracing chaos, arguing constantly, and somehow turning their mess into strength. Lila nodded. Perhaps there's more than one path to wisdom. As the human ships departed, their improbable engines flaring to life, Lila stood in silence, her thoughts swirling. The universe had just shown her something entirely unexpected. The Xantari watched in silence. The species that had answered their desperate call had completely upended their understanding of civilization, efficient technology, and proper crisis management. They'll be back, Lila said with certainty. Humans seem incapable of leaving a mystery unsolved or a neighbor unvisited. The universe just got a lot more interesting, Maxwell Rivers added philosophically, his skin shifting to a serene blue. It's become a much more intriguing place. And somewhere among the stars, humanity's ramshackle fleet was already heading home, their engines sputtering to life. They were already planning their next impossible rescue mission because that's what humans do best, showing up when called, breaking every rule in the book, and somehow making the galaxy work a little better through sheer stubborn improbability.